Connecting to cloud server. There we go. All right, everyone. We are now officially recording the first of our online discussion forum calls. Um, Welcome to the call. As everyone knows, this week we were covering episode 6 of the Explorer series, which is another interaction with Miranon, talking about levels and planes of existence. But I think before we get started there, maybe we can introduce ourselves. Whoever wants to introduce themselves, no one has to. But I'll essentially just open it up, and as you want to introduce, um, just come off mic and say who you are. I'm Mark Cruson. I am a chapter leader in the Puget Sound area of Washington State. I am also on the leadership council for the local chapter network. And so maybe if I guess it's going to be too crazy for everyone to kind of run around. So I'll just run down the list of people, and if you want to come off mute and introduce yourself, that's fine. If you don't, that's no problem. John.
Okay, well, I'm from La Mesa, California, down in the San Diego area. I don't have any authority or any kind of degree that pertains to this, but I'm very intensely interested in the whole idea of consciousness expansion, and I love what we're doing here.
Well, and you also have a lot of experience now with randonauting and with connecting with plant intelligence.
Yes, those are two of my fantasies. I've been really enjoying that. I did a randonaut yesterday. It was funny. The randonaut brought me back to a tree in my alley. Okay, it was about 15 steps where I was. Now you have to realize randonauting works by throwing a whole bunch of locations in the circle area, thousands and thousands, and then they come up with the area that is most touched by those. I mean, the frequency is most touched. Well, somehow I got into that, and I found that my tree had been growing without water for a while, and it was thirsty. It was telling me, "Hey, come give me a drink." I had to get it from granddaughter.
That's great.
It was funny, but I was embarrassed that I had neglected it to that extent.
Understood. Well, let's keep moving. Ronnie.
Hi, hear me?
Uh-huh.
All right. Yes, my name is Ronnie Sines, and I live in the LA area. I'm actually only living here because of work. I'm from a small town in further north of California called Bishop, and it's out in the middle of the nowhere practically. So I'm pretty new to this Monroe, I don't know what's a good technical word, stuff.
Community.
Yes, and I've just gone over his books, his audiobooks, just this year, beginning of the year, when I started studying or listening and reading stuff coming out of Monroe. There's so much stuff that's coming out of there, like I think I mentioned before. I haven't even touched like all this here, what you mentioned. I mean, there's so many things there, and there's so many other stuff coming. You could get through the Monroe website, and I don't even know where to begin. I just going to read the books that I have, like one step at a time, and listen to and be involved with this to learn more. So that's where I'm at with
Gotcha.
Monroe.
Thank you, Ronnie. The only thing I would say in reaction to that is we're here to explore, and we're all just exploring together, whether it's through the Explorer series, which kind of introduces us to other thoughts and things. But what I love about the work we do is not that we're here to kind of instruct you in anything you need to do or think, but it's more where we're introducing concepts, we're hearing things sometimes for the 80th time, sometimes for the first time, and it sparks our imagination for further exploration. So, if you're getting that, then that's all that matters. There's no reward for having explored the most different categories or anything like that. It's just Here we go. Let's keep going. Ed.
Hey, I'm Ed. I'm in Fairfax, Virginia.
Hey, Ed.
Hi.
And Ed has been to many programs. So Ed is a longtime experiencer of the Monroe community and knows it pretty darn well.
That's right.
Um,
I live kind of close to it too.
Makes it nice and easy.
Yeah, I
Uh,
can't wait for it to reopen.
Understood. Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm right up the road from Ed in Bowie, Maryland, and so I'm pretty close to TMI as well. I first came across TMI back in 1995. Went to a gateway, kept my interest, and then life happened, and I went back in 2013, and I've been to about a program once a year, and I've always wanted to. I remember back in '95 they had like the Explorer series on audio tapes, as we can hear, and the fact that they're now just open in the archive, really enjoying, listening to these and discussing these with people because they're real gems there. And so there you have it.
Thank you, Matt. Maria.
Oh, hi, everyone. Sorry for the background. There's a little city noise. I'm Marie from New York City. I took the online Gateway Experience course with Andrea Berger. That was really awesome. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to participate with you folks in these online meetings. And I'm also very happy that one good thing of the virus, if we could say that, is just that TMI is going more online. So I think that's a really great thing. It allows potentially anyone on Earth to participate where they could never have gone to the physical location. So I think that's a very positive step. Good to be here with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you. And I apologize for saying Maria. I should have
That's
said,
okay.
sorry. Kathy.
Yeah, I'm live in Tacoma, Washington, and I'm a part of the Pacific or the Puget Sound local network. And I have to say that I was born in La Mesa, California, where John is at right now.
Hey.
Yep. Although I haven't lived there in 40 years, but that's where I was born. So I'm just happy to be here, and I'm very excited about today because when I listen to that Miranon tape, I'm a big fan of the raw material, and it fits so nicely in with consistently with the raw material.
That's really cool. I can't wait to hear some of the parallels you'll get to draw. Sky. Now, is it Sky Pelletier waterpiece? Did I say that right?
Well, it would be, in America, we usually say Pelletier. It really should be Pelletier.
Pelletier. Thank you.
Pelletier.
Thank you.
Unless you're from New Orleans, in which case it's Pelletier. But we're from French Canada, so thanks. Yeah, my name is Sky Pelletier Waterpiece, Pelletier Waterpiece, and I am a local chapter leader from southern New Jersey in the United States. And I am here at this meeting because I just found out about it, and I'm very, very excited to discuss. I've listened to the tape 6 a few times, and so I just listened to it again, in preparation for this talk, and I'm just looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say.
Thank you. Sky did not mention, but I will do that for him. He's also newly appointed to the local chapter network leadership council. We're very excited to have him and the energy he's bringing to the group. So welcome, Sky, from multiple levels.
Thank you. And since you mentioned that, I'll go ahead and mention I then proceeded to miss the first local chapter leadership call at 12:30 because I had my time screwed up. So I don't know why I was thinking the time change was that it was after this call, but anyway, I
No worries, no worries. It was really about outreach training, so it wasn't, no problem.
But I'm looking forward to the recording because it should be interesting. But anyway, thanks.
Jane.
I'm Jane from Stockholm, Sweden. The first time I came in contact with Monroe was in the 90s. So now I was in the gateway, the virtual gateway experience. So,
And you've been a regular here for our calls on the online discussion forum. So it's great to see you as usual. Thank you.
thank you.
And our last person is Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Alyssa, newbie here. I've been to Monroe for Gateway maybe 11 years ago, and then I was back last year to do Suzanne Giesman's Serving Spirit 1 and 2. So that's where I am.
Great. Well, welcome to the call.
Too.
Thank you.
Yes, Ed, you did that as well?
Yeah, I think Alyssa and I were in the same groups.
Oh, sweet.
That's great. Ed, were we in the same group with Suzanne, or did we take different classes? Because I did both of hers as well.
We had to be in the same group, otherwise I would have never met you.
Okay, I didn't know if I had met you in the Suzanne Giesman ones or if I had met you before, because I feel like I've seen you on multiple occasions.
Yeah, that's probably true.
All the classes start to blend together after a while.
They do.
So let's go ahead, and especially because I'm sure our online people are like, okay, let's get past all the introductions. I want to get into the material. Especially since they're going to look it up and just look for episode 6. So this is, at some point, we're going to have to go back and start with episode 1 again so that people will have an online discussion of episodes 1 through 5 as well. And then one thing I will say is that we did a fantastic session where we summarized episodes 1 through 5. I really wish we had recorded that session. That one was just creme de la creme of material, but it is what it is. So let's go ahead and start with this week's session. I put some study questions together, but that was before I'd read the material, or I'd listened to the material, and I'm not even sure I care about what those questions are. So let's do this. Let's first of all, let's kind of go around and have some general reactions to this episode. And then we'll start to kind of dig into individual pieces of it. But let's not, you know how sometimes when you have an orchestral conductor and they've just started the rehearsal and they immediately jump into the details. Do the whole piece first, and then let's go back and choose some individual pieces. And I'm sorry, there's an airplane flying over me. So who wants to start with kind of what was their general reaction to this episode?
I'll go ahead and start simply because I wanted to make the comparison to the raw material. It's a fairly obvious comparison.
Well, can you first of all explain what is the raw material? Because many people may have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, the raw material is Channeled Contact. It's a series of books that was put out in the early 80s. It was a group of 3 people who who came together and channeled the material that came through from the book from an entity called Ra. And Ra is a social member complex of the 6th density. So it's a very advanced civilization that originally originated on Venus over 1 billion years ago. So they were involved in coming to Earth back in the Egyptian times. They kind of got their communications, the material that they gave to the Egyptians got corrupted. So they left the planet and have watched us ever since, and have been looking for an opportunity to come back and try to correct some of the distortions that had occurred as a result of their wisdom. So, and what it is it's a basic overall cosmology. I mean, it gives you a huge cosmology to be able to understand reality. And one of the things that was cool, and one of the things that one of the things I liked about Miranon was the raw material is built. Their philosophy is built around the 7 octaves or 7 densities of existence, and the soul's purpose is to basically go up those densities until they get to the very top density and rejoin all that is. And the thing about it was that they were both so clearly, and in the raw material they say that the Earth has inner planes of its own, but all of existence follows the basic rule of 7, and having Miranon reinforce that, and then goes through those density or those level of planes of existence was just fascinating to me. So it was something that reinforced each other.
So, Kathy, I have a question for you. So, the raw material was channeled when? Do you know?
1981 through 1984.
Okay. And the Explorer series was done what, in the 70s, do we think?
Yes. Well, actually, those recordings, I'm not absolutely sure. You guys
Yeah.
would have
Well,
to do more for me, but I would say so.
yeah. What occurs to me is, do we know? Does Miranon ever really talk about where Miranon's from in the same sense? Like, is it possible that Miranon and Ra, not
No,
necessarily
they're
they're the
not.
same thing, but you know how we think of everything on this plane as, how do I want to put it? Separate and distinct. So if you're from
Yeah,
Egypt, you're not from here or from
right.
there. Where I kind of wonder over there, when you're all kind of there and you're all kind of connected in a way, is there a possibility that Miranon could be a person in the Ra civilization,
Actually,
or like a friend of the Ra civilization, and
the
like a fellow,
way
hey traveler, how's it going? And so they all kind of share some of the, I don't know. That's just
the way I interpret it from what Miranon, I'm less familiar with Miranon. I've read through the raw material a couple times now. And I've also going expanding into more of the raw stuff that came later, that was after the books were published. Um, well, the difference is in raw, they referenced the inner planes of Earth. They acknowledged that the Earth had inner planes, and that is something completely separate from what they're talking about as far as the densities that your spirit goes through. And it's really densities of consciousness is what I think the way you want to look at it. But Miranon says he's on the 47th level or the 46th level, something like that, 47th level of the Earth plane.
46th.
46th. And Ra is well past that. Miranon's not. Miranon's nowhere near where the raw consciousness complex is, from my interpretation of it. And there's nothing that says my interpretation's right. But since Ra has clearly stated they're completely separate from anything on the Earth planes. And Miranon is on the Earth planes and acknowledges that. And I have heard other sources refer to the 40, and I always get the number wrong, but they always say there's like 48, 47, 48 planes within the Earth, within the Earth existence.
Well, that's really cool. Well, let's keep going around the group and have other reactions to this episode. Unless you anything else you wanted to say about this episode before we move on?
No, that was it.
Okay, cool. What about Sky? Because you said you've heard this episode before, but you've heard it again. Like you've listened to it a couple times, and you listen to it again. Kind of, what's your perspective, Sky?
Thank you for that. So, yeah, I'm trying to remember when I first heard it. I believe it was one of my assignments for maybe when I did the Lifting the Veil program, which is the 3-week online version of, or sort of reinterpretation of the Lifelines program. I think maybe it was for that, but it might have been when I did the online Gateway experience. In any event, one of our assignments was to there was a section on that. And so I guess what I'll talk about is what I was thinking today. What I was thinking today is I kept getting obsessed with how Miranon describes that the first 7 levels are the plant levels, and the next 7 levels are the animal levels. And so it's not till you get to level 15 that you're in the lowest of the human levels. And I was trying to identify, like, are these levels the same thing as we talk about when we talk about focus levels? And so if that's the case, then am I always in my normal life operating at like the lowest plant level as a human? So I was sort of like, and as Miranon was speaking, I kept sort of thinking about like the different, the different levels within the, as he later called it, different circles, and the different focus levels that I'm familiar with. So for example, I would go back and say, okay, so 15 is like level 1. 15 and 1 are on the same, the same plane or whatever. And I didn't come up with anything intelligent about any of that, but one last thing I want to mention that I thought was fascinating was describing the 5th level as a descending level. And so the 5th level would be, I guess, would be 5, and then would be 5 plus 7 would be 12. And focus 12 is one I'm very, very familiar with. And in attempting to describe what the experience of being in the 5th level is, Miranon used this. I know I've heard it before, but this was the first time I really zeroed in on it. This description of being like rain coming in and aware of its level. And I just thought of like the idea, like, like there is Buddha nature in everything, including the rocks and things like that. Like the consciousness exists on all levels. And I thought about rain, a drop of rain coalescing from whatever it was before it was rain and coming into this physical world, being aware that it's coming into it. And I thought, what a fascinating concept, because I had never thought of the consciousness of a raindrop before. And the idea of that was so vivid to me that here, a raindrop, I can sort of physically think of it in terms of water vapor coalesces and condenses, but in terms of the consciousness that at the point at which it's a raindrop, it knows the world that it's entering into. So that was what I was thinking. That's a smattering of the things I was thinking about when I listened to it today.
So, Sky, what I think is really interesting, and in a way, let's lead off from that, and we're going to circle to John. And John, here's where I'm curious. So, John, you've been doing a lot of interacting with plant consciousness. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about, in your experience of interfacing with plant consciousness, what is plant consciousness like? Because, Sky, when you were talking about this idea of the levels of plant, the levels of animal, I think it's easier for us to understand animal consciousness in a way, because if you have a cat or a dog, or you just spend time sitting outside looking at animals, if you just sit back and observe and you think about their behavior towards and with you, you start to get a sense of where are they thinking. You don't necessarily know, like you don't have to like psychically tune in with them to get a sense of what are they thinking. But with plants, it's a little different. If you don't kind of tune in with them psychically, and I'm sorry, it's just like airplane and helicopter day here above my house. If you don't tune in with those plants at a consciousness level, then it's going to be kind of difficult, because I think they operate at a very different way of thinking and being. And so we're so used to, as humans, of kind of, here's how I function, here's the way I do things. John, tell us a little bit about, in your experience of interacting with plants, how do they think? What are they like? What is their level of consciousness even? What does that even mean?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm still trying to penetrate that myself. But from where I'm at right now, I think it's important to realize that plants do have a consciousness, and it varies from one plant to another in a very wide range, just like animals. We have ants and beetles on one end, and we have porpoises and whales on the other, you know, and us in between someplace. It's interesting that from what I understand with my limited so far contact with them, is that they actually communicate with us in several different levels. Number one is a very primitive kind of, you might say, telepathy, you know, where they can tell you, hey, I'm thirsty, give me water, or something like that, you know. And this is not much different than the level of dogs and cats, okay? So that's pretty much where a lot of plants are, and many of them remain there, but you will find some of them that go far beyond that and could be way advanced in intellectual ability from humans, at least as possible. I saw a very interesting video recently about the octopus. The octopus has a distributed processing mentality. You know, it has brains, it has 3 actual brains in its little noggin, but every single little sucker that it has is a separate brain of its own. It acts independently, you know. It's almost so alien that, in fact, some scientists say this is from another planet, you know. This whole genus, you know, octopus, squid, all the others, scuttlefish, they all belong to this. What that tells me is that there is a level of, you might say, communication ability or intellect that is a step beyond, a different dimension than this primitive, give me water, that kind of thing, you know, that I have not reached successfully so far. But I believe it's there. And I believe that some researchers in the past have actually dealt with this level of being aware, having thoughts, making decisions, liking some people more than others. All this kind of stuff is heavily documented as anecdotal, you know. Nobody has come along and done scientific studies on it because it was discouraged back in the 70s and most of the work was done. But I believe that what they're onto is that plants have a level of awareness above the material point where they can actually reach out and have a real communion, a community. It can form a community of consciousness. And this exists in many different forms, but I believe that maybe trees are one of the better examples of this, because they've been here a long time. They've been able to organize themselves physically in the planet, setting down roots and everything, and they have long lives. And so I think most of the high voltage spirituality and intellectuality of plants is going to be mostly in trees for that reason. And I'm very excited about understanding that this level even exists. I mean, I didn't really suspect it. But it's come to me in various downloads that I've had. And then reading the literature from the past about investigators who went out with instruments that actually detailed some of this stuff makes it even more likely that there's something here that we've not really contacted yet. And plants are a society just like aliens, you know. I mean, they're just as alien as any alien out there because they have all 5 senses that we have, but in another form, you know. They're every one of our senses plus 12 others is available to us, and they have the ability to communicate telepathically if they want to. The thing is, many of them don't want to, apparently. But I think you have to get their attention that you're really sincere, and being a person of somewhat right mind anyway does help. But the main thing is, I have found that if you don't love them, they're going to shut up. Period. You know, love is the connector with plants. If you can show that you have a real caring attitude towards them, I'm hoping that this is the touchstone that will open them up and allow me to get to this secondary or third or fourth level of intellection, where they become like people, just like us. You know, they communicate with us and communicate telepathically on a level that's consonant with what we would do if a race came in from outer space.
Well,
So
John, let's keep moving because you covered a lot of material there, and there's a lot of stuff to consider.
Yeah.
What I'm going to quickly say from my perspective in regards to that is when I first studied metaphysics, the way plant, animal, and human consciousness were kind of explained to me, and it actually made sense to me, and it started actually with minerals and things like that, and then kind of worked its way up, is that in those earlier phases of consciousnness didn't really embed inside. It was observing from outside, and it would learn these lessons by observing. And it was the same thing with plants and then with animals. And then when it came to humans, consciousness actually started entering inside the vehicle so that you would have the ability to say, ooh, I want to go do something with my learning, so I'm going to kind of just go do it. And so it was a different, that was what differentiated humans from animals and plants. Not that we're better, it's just, it's a different way of learning for the consciousness that's behind it. So in my own experience with plant consciousness, I've noted that when I open up and I connect with it, it's kind of like connecting in a way with a family. It's not really a consciousness of one, like a differentiated consciousness the way we think of it. It's more like connecting with almost this group that doesn't really understand the idea of the one separate, which if you look at how, at least from our perspective, when you look, like I look in my backyard right now and you see all of the grass, well, is there a consciousness for that blade of grass? Or is the consciousness for the whole field of grass? And same thing with the trees and everything else. And then when you walk in the forest and you have all of these trees and plants together, I mean, it kind of boggles the mind. So
Yeah.
to take it from a meta level, in a way, if you think of computer systems, we're in a way going down to like operating systems. We're looking at like plants have perhaps an operating system, humans have a different operating system. It's not that, again, it's not one's better, one's right, one's wrong. No, it's just different. So let's keep moving around the room and get those general reactions to this episode, and then we'll start digging into some pieces. Go ahead, Kathy.
Just a quick comment on what both of you said. One is, according to Ra, animals and plants have what they call a collective consciousness. So it is a collective type thing rather than maybe an individual type thing. And the other thing is that according to Ra, depending on the circumstances of a planet, vegetation, i.e. trees and other types of it, can become sentient beings and can develop into civilizations. And it's one of the funny things that I just reread that section yesterday. That's the point at which I am in the book that I'm rereading. And I just reread that yesterday. And when John brought that up, it just brought that right up to me, and that this planet has been visited on at least 2 occasions by a tree-like entity or type being.
Well, and Kathy, what's interesting is if you think about science fiction, at times they will put out things like, ooh, here's the alien virus, like the pod people or whatever those things are. And yeah, some of that is based on our fears of that which is different. But who knows where some of that may come from this collective consciousness. They may tap into a piece of collective consciousness. Their understanding of it is one that's fearful for them. And so then they bring this back. But in a way, do we really have original thoughts, or are we kind of tapping into all of these other things in our different consciousness? So, I don't know. I just think this really opens up a lot of room for discussion. So anyway, let's keep going. Ed, Marie, Ronnie, Jane, Peter, any of you have or Matt, any general thoughts about this episode before we start digging into specifics?
Okay, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Sorry about my camera. It must have went out. I'll look into it.
No problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is something new that I haven't heard before, but something strange about it that it seems familiar from a lot of things that I um, go through the Monroe material. Even though I cannot remember, I read it somewhere, or listened to it somewhere, it still seems familiar, like it's an old memory. But the thing about those levels of Mirion is, I was trying to, how does that relate to what we been here on Earth are called the 7 levels of higher consciousness? You know, you have the astral, the mental, and so on. That the Eastern religions use a lot. How do you connect those two? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Ronnie, my answer would be I don't know there is necessarily an answer to some of this stuff. It's not like an engineering diagram where I could say, oh, this, and this all connects, and that's exactly how it intersects here. Like if we're looking in a physical material perspective, of these lipids connect and they lead to this, and that's how this is physically connected. We're getting in areas here that they're matters of opinion, but there's more to it than that. It's not just I'm throwing something on the wall and it just is this, but it's deeper and more complex. Some of them are philosophical. Some of them are, it's really experiential. That, to me, is, I think, at the root of all of this is different people have these experiences. They try to explain them, and then you'll start to see some intermeshing. And that's, like, for instance, when Kathy is explaining her understanding of the raw material and how it's coming through versus what came through in the Miranon material. You're seeing this marrying together. Some things match, some things don't. And I'm not as concerned with I'm going to determine this one is factually accurate and that one's wrong. I'm not even going to get down to the level of this piece here is right and all the rest of that's wrong. And I'm not even sure that's what matters. To me, it's, in the end, how is this going to help us in our own explorations? So for instance, if I go out of body and I start encountering some things, is this going to be the kind of information that helps me go, oh, I remember that. That's actually really helpful. So I'm not scared of this other state. I am embracing of it. And so in understanding these other consciousnesses, when you interact with them, either out of body, in a dream, when you get into an incredibly deep meditative state, and you encounter something, instead of being afraid of it because all you've ever interacted with is a human, you're now interacting with a plant, but you don't even know that it's a plant because you don't have your physical eyes sitting next to the plant and you're connecting with, but you just connect with something. These are things that kind of broaden your experience so that you have a better understanding of what you're dealing with. That's the Mark Cruson take. Anybody else want to go in and start either address what Ronnie said or talk about your experience with this particular episode? Matt,
Hi.
any thoughts? Oh,
Hi.
sorry. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, hi all. Sorry I was late. I was in a traffic jam. That's an interesting coincidence because we are working on a book on Hamisync and the heritage of Bob Monroe in German. And we started last week that we took the whole Miranon part on our bucket list and said, hey, yeah, we have to also have a chapter on that. So I'm listening to you. Yeah, looking into plant, I'm more the space guy. My wife is more the gardening plants type. But what I see is that often I'm the first one who realizes that somebody needs water or something. So that seems to work on my level. So this basic, hey, I am thirsty, give me water. And we had years ago, I don't know if you know Alana Moore and Power Towers, and we had a workshop with her with spirits, plant spirits, and things like that, what was quite interesting. But basically, we will start now in the next months reinvestigating Miranon And whatever you have, interesting things, we want to somehow to share the knowledge that is there 25 years after Bob transitioned, what means HemiSync in 2020. So if you have anything interesting, the hope is that the book will not only be in German, it will have a scientific part really going into history, but on the other side also stories, experiences, and we want to open wide on a global level.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to recommend that you have conversations with Candy Sanderson and with Beth Haley, because they've been involved in studying this material for this particular series of calls for quite a while. And so they were kind of my cohorts in doing episodes 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and then I did chapter 5. But I think they would have some really interesting perspectives to add on some of the previous material as well. So
okay, what was the first one? Beth, I know we did some seminars together, and the other was
Candace Sanderson. She is the chapter leader for the Naples chapter.
Okay, yeah, then I have heard the name, but I have no picture.
She also wrote Reluctant Messenger and the Reluctant Messenger Returns, which if she was here, she would, bring up her book and show us.
Okay.
And she helped to start the local chapter network 10, 12 years ago.
Okay.
When it got going. So she's a great resource for all of this. She also does a lot of channeling, so that's where I think she relates from a personal channeling perspective of this stuff too.
Okay.
And anybody else have any thoughts or suggestions?
Nobody.
I have a suggestion.
Go ahead.
Okay. Why don't we pool our efforts with posting some reading material references so that Peter can get to them and all of us can get to them and read some of this stuff that's not Monroe material, but it touches on Monroe material in many ways. And maybe use our good old-fashioned Hangouts for doing this.
Hey, we can always do that and always add that stuff in there. I don't know if this is pertaining though to what Peter wants, because I think he's very specifically focused on Miranon. Am I correct?
No, but Miranon will just be a chapter. We have a really interesting network. We have a lot of people supporting us. And there are really guys that are 90 years old. We didn't even know that they're still alive, and one gives us to the other and gives us an email. So we are in contact with Skip Oddwater, for example, with the old guys that worked with Bob. So it's quite an interesting work for us also. So whatever you have, whatever you find, because what we found out, the material, it's really a lot. And we have, the team is Nicole Stöcker, probably some of you know her, and we have one guy coaching us, and he is a retired teacher, high school teacher, and he does a lot of reading and reading, bringing it summaries. So the whole life of Bob in 3 or 4 pages. What's quite a lot of work too, and everything really sources really scientifically, so that, and we found out that a lot of misinformation is there and not clear stuff. So we really have to dig in and to find what's probably the right history and what's wrong. But it's interesting.
Thank you,
so
Peter.
Whatever you have my email there on the screen. We are based in Zurich, Switzerland, and therefore, if you have anything that could be interesting, the purpose is really 2020, 25 years after Bob's transition, what does HemiSync mean today? What are people doing with it? What do they achieve? And not only our personal success stories.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
So let's keep our movement, and anybody else want to do a general, because I'm ready to start digging into the specific things, and we'll bring up some topics. But for Marie, Jane, Ed, Matt, any of you want to say anything before we start going down the specific road?
I do, because one thing that I really found interesting was with I think the gateway, during the gateway, they have the color run, and the colors that Miranon talks about, I think they're connected to the color run from that exercise. And that I find fascinating, that connection I find fascinating, because I know during the gateway, because one thing I listened to it this morning and I was thinking, I know somewhere I have all of this, like there's a handout they give you that illustrates all the things that Marinon's talking about. And I wish I had that illustration to, better, while I'm listening to this to really better understand it. But somewhere it's buried in a pile of papers. But what I
Well,
really
what
thought
you
was
might
interesting
find
though
is if
was
you go to the archives and look up colors.
I tried,
Oh, okay.
you know, I did. I typed in Maranon. I didn't type in colors, and I
I
couldn't
have
find
that
anything. I just
illustration. I could show that. I got to transfer it onto my computer, but I could share it on the screen if that's helpful to anybody.
I think at some point that would be pretty helpful.
Yeah, Sky.
But I just found it interesting because I remember, how the colors and what level going through the levels. And again, I always wanted to know like what influence this session had with creating that exercise, with discovering, developing the focus levels of hemisync, and that kind of behind the scenes, that additional information. But that's all I had to share, was just kind of, the colors and how they coordinate with exercise, and how this session kind of helped to shape that exercise and played a role in Bob's cosmology as.
Thank you, Matt. That's really cool. The whole color issue is another discussion to have. But yeah, interesting. Let's keep going, and then we'll kind of come back to that because Sky will share that. Marie, you came off mute. What would you like to say?
Um, just two things basically. I had a question similar to what Sky brought up initially, which was every reality, Maranon said, every reality has 7 levels, whether it's the physical plane or any other plane, there's always 7 levels. And realizing it's totally true what you said, Mark, we're not talking about an engineering diagram, and true reality is far more complex. But I was kind of wondering too, how the focus levels, from 1 through 48 would relate to those 7 levels in our plane. The second thing that was interesting to me was where he talks about guides, and he said like he's a part of Liana and Liana is a part of him, and I assume he needs to have her grow um, because he needs to advance from level 46 to 47. But it was interesting. He gives the analogy of a rubber band being pulled in different directions. And he said, souls, we all wander off in different directions, but eventually we will have to all come back together. And he's at the point where he had to bring Liana, help her to move forward a bit so that they could help each other. And guides have to have that close personal connection because everyone's vibrations are unique, and you have to vibrate closely, have that close connection in order to be a guide and have that relationship. So I never thought about that. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, so many things to consider. Here we go. Sky, thank you. Sky, is this from? Yes, this is you, Sky, right? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, this is at least the modern version of a handout that would have been given out in the Gateway experience, the Gateway voyage, and I downloaded it as part of my Gateway experience online. And this is a handout version of a drawing that Liana made in between the first and the second conversation they had. At some point, she refers something about making a drawing, and so when Miranon talks about the different levels, so let's see, the blue is the looks like a sine wave that's going left to right, and he refers to it as a horizontal level. And the red is this sort of corresponding horizontal level that's also looks like a sine wave going left to right. And the yellow is the horizontal level that's neither going up or down. I'd be happy to forward this if anyone wants to. Maybe I could forward it to you, Mark, and if you want to distribute it, because it's worth re-listening to this tape with this visual in mind. It sort of makes everything a little bit easier to understand. Like when he talks about the descending level 5 that I talked about, it was the green. The one with the consciousness sort of being aware of the level that it's going down into, that's the sort of vertical looking sine wave. And we talked about the white, which circles and contains everything, level 7, which is level 7, and of course is also level 21, is one of the 7th levels, and so forth like that. And you can see the white encircles the entire thing. Anyway, so I'll withdraw and let you guys continue talking, but I just wanted to make sure to put this up.
Thank you, Sky. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I'd very much like to have that myself.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, if you'll send that, I'll send that out to the group afterwards. And you know what? I wonder if this is posted on the archive site. But yeah, so if you can stop sharing for a minute, let's go back so the people on the call we can all see each other. There we go. Thank you for sharing that. Marie, did that kind of okay?
I remember that. I remember that from the Gateway course also, as one of the handouts. But there, it still doesn't show the relationship between the focus levels and the 7 levels. But again, I appreciate life is not an engineering diagram. So,
Well, I think what's most important is that you figure something out that makes sense to you. Kind of what struck me is when I looked at that diagram and it had the 15 to 21, and I think of in our experience with Gateway, you get to 21, and that's the edge of physical and non-physical contact. Exactly what does that mean, for you? So all this says to me is there's a lot more exploration to do here, and the exploration is going to be personal. Let's understand right off the bat, all these things that we're talking about, none of us are going out and preaching this to somebody as this is the truth, because these are experiential things. So the kind of proof we're talking about is proof that helps you understand and say, that makes sense to me. This has helped me on my journey of exploration. The people who are doing physical proofing of X, Y, and Z, that's a different thing, and we wouldn't show a chart like this and suddenly say that proves anything. These are in a way giving ourselves maps so we can continue our exploration and our understandings. So just throwing that out there. Since we actually are starting to run out of time, I'm going to go ahead and start covering some of the individual pieces that came here, and I'm very curious. So when Miranon was talking about these levels 1 through 7, and I think it was not as much the 1 through 7 meaning 1 the plant level, but 1 and the corresponding 1, 8, 16, etc. 16, 15, etc. So first talked about 1 is blue, and says that the first 3 levels are horizontal, and for new beings to get used to being in that physical. So I'm assuming in the physical as plants, in the physical as animals, as humans, kind of trying to wrap my mind around that to a degree. Said level 2 is a mirror image of the first one. So we saw in the image that Sky showed, one went down, the other one, so it kind of went like this together, 1, 2, etc. Mirror of the first, reverse of 1, the color is red, and beings are learning about the senses, and then mentions, but of course all the levels touch the other levels. Level 3 goes through 1 and 2, which was easier to demonstrate with the chart. Color is yellow, and it's expansion of the mind. 4 is where, interesting mentioned, is where both Miranon and Leanna are. I was like, oh, that's an interesting thing to consider. Color is rose, and the quality is love. Level 5 and 6 are complementary. Mentioned that there are few souls on those levels. 5 is green and healing light, peaceful. 6, the color purple. And 7 crosses all the others and unites them, and the color is white. I'm just going to quickly go through the rest of my notes on the levels. Then the level is 1 through 7 are plants, 8 through 14 animals, 15 to 21 are humans. And to go beyond level 7, 14, or 21, you have to be willing to give up the physical form of that previous level. So it's almost like saying that if you're going to go beyond level 7 as a plant, you have to be willing to say, I'm not going to be a plant anymore. I'm going to now be an animal. So you're going to let go of the plant experience, kind of let go of that body, etc. And you're now going to move into the animal experience at 8 or the human experience at 15. So I thought that was an interesting idea. Then you had 20 through 28 are the bridge states after death. And then once at 28, you will not incarnate again as a human. So if you go beyond 28, you're not going to incarnate again as a human. So it's almost like, now that, well, there's another thing that'll bring up. And then here guides choose to be guides to those in physical form. I believe that was 29 through 35, whatever. 7 upon 7 circles, etc. And the last thing I'll mention will be about the purpose of guide. So I'm kind of going through my notes on this. The purpose of guidance and counsel is that any guide must have that close connection that you mentioned, Marie, with whoever they have provided guidance, and they're guides for every person. It's so interesting. A lot of people say, well, I've never talked to my guides. Well, it could be that it's not that the guides don't exist or they've ignored them. It's just either we haven't understood how to hear them, or we need to do some things on our own, and they'll be there and they'll kind of guide us in these other ways. It may not be a, hey buddy, how's it going? You know? And I'm sure that got arranged at whatever point. And then Miranon's purpose is to gather up the other parts of self and help them to see. I thought that was an interesting phrase. Mentioned that Leanna has 5 guides working with her, and that Bob had 9 that Miranon knew of. And then there's a need for us to explore each of our potential. So yeah, that's everything. Those are the notes I took down. What I thought was interesting in this explanation from Miranon is that you have to give up one level to go to another one. But I feel like we're starting to understand that time is, it exists at the same time, so to speak. It's not necessarily linear. It's linear here in the physical, but once you get out of the physical, I'm not so sure that you have to say, well, I can never go back to being a plant again. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe now that I'm in human form, I will not be able to go back and do a plant life. But I don't know. I don't know. Something tells me I can do that if that's important. Maybe I'm a plant, some form of plant on Mars or something, like deep in ground, or who knows what it is. Now that we've covered some of those specifics, any thoughts? Any thoughts about the horizontal nature of this stuff? Any thoughts about guides and the purpose of guides? Any of the Miranon material? Go ahead, Sky.
I just want to mention, we've touched on this a couple times, but at one point, Miranon said something like levels below, and said, you know, below's not the right word. Like, it's hard to describe spatially. And it's worth remembering that, like, even with this diagram, like, it really is, the impression I got was of a consciousness, I don't want to say struggling, but searching for the right way of expressing what was trying to be expressed to, like, you know, fungus like us or whatever, like that, you know what I mean, to like people who had such a limited concept of the natures of consciousness, to try to express it. And that was, and I very much, that's one of the things, these little bits of verisimilitude that I find, that the idea that you really got the impression that he was searching for the right way of saying it, and even so said, look, this isn't quite it, but this is the best I can do, is to use this sort of spatial analogy.
Thank you, Scott. That was a really good point. Who else has some thoughts? because then I'm going to bring up a question, kind of as we start to wind down. How does this relate to you now? It's great. We've talked a lot in theory. It's almost like we're in the college classroom kind of discussing, this stuff. But let's now take it into your practical life. What does any of what we just talked about, of what we just looked at with all the Miranon levels and these levels of existence, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to you in your daily life? What do you think you can do with this, if anything? Did you resonate with this? Did this suddenly answer all sorts of questions for you? Or you're like, well, interesting intellectually, but I don't really get anything out of it. And it's okay. There's not a right answer to this. I just want to see what comes from these discussions to see if this leads to any further explorations or anything like that. So let's just open it to the floor.
Well, I'll volunteer something. As far as spirituality is concerned, I tend to place things like this, these schemas of reality and everything from the various different sources into a box which says something like possible but not necessary. My own spirituality is more along the lines of non-duality. And non-duality, if you're aware of it, is that there's only one thing. Consciousness is everything. Everything else is an object of consciousness, is in the field of consciousness. It's not consciousness itself. And so you can have an infinite variety of different expressions of consciousness. No problem. That's just natural to it. Consciousness is infinitely diversified and infinitely pluralistic, you might say. So I tend to think all these schemes of reality somewhat as schemas of interest. They might point out something of value that goes beyond the schema itself. In other words, it might show you something about reality that you need to know, but it probably won't be related to the schema. It'll be something that evolves from the schema. That's my own approach anyway.
Thank you, John. That's actually really interesting. Maria, I saw you came off mute.
Yeah, for me, I was wondering, I would have liked more details about what Miranon was trying to do working with Liana and his approaches, like what was he actually doing with her, practically speaking, so that they could grow together. And it just gives me an incentive to want to grow and expand consciousness, so that I could better communicate with my guides and with other consciousnesses. It's really just an incentive for growth.
Well, and it's interesting, in the previous episode 5, Miranon explained one of the interactions that Miranon and Leanna had in Lemuria. Whatever you think of Lemuria, or as a physical reality, or as another dimension, or whatever it was, but having to do with thought and how that worked. And then Leanna did something that kind of cut off their access. I will say, with my own interaction with guidance over the years, I've had many different types of experiences. I've had times when I feel like guidance is talking to me during the middle of the day. I have times where I kind of go to a deeper level of meditation and then have guidance come in my own work now, where I'm training to channel. I've found what's interesting in the last 2 days, I'm getting to that point where I start to feel an energy come in. And the last 2 days, I've had this decidedly different type of energy I hadn't experienced before come in. And the best way I can describe it is, it felt like an older Asian man, maybe Japanese, I wasn't sure, but essentially I got the answer. He came in and said, "I'm here to help you learn to focus." Wasn't room for a lot of chitty chat, wasn't a lot of touchy feely. It was, we're here to focus. And I thought that was really interesting. So we spent the rest of that session essentially spending time in focus. And that's I've had other relationships with guidance where it's much more about love and learning to kind of love myself and kind of where am I at that moment? What do I need? So, and do I know, are these parts of myself? Like, could I even be a physical materialist and believe in all this? Absolutely. If you don't think anything is real beyond the physical, you can still benefit from this idea of guidance from parts, accessing parts of your own personality that can come through and help you. Now, I don't happen to be a physical materialist, but that's what I think is beautiful about this is wherever you're coming from, all of these concepts can really be helpful to you in your growth. So that's what I would say with guidance, etc. Any other thoughts as we start to wind this session down?
Sure. This is Ronnie. You hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So it's along the same lines. What I'm getting out of it is that it's information that, especially if we transcend into the higher levels, that we understand what's going on, and we're not stopped anywhere or blocked anywhere because we're confused and in the state of unknowing and trying to figure it out. We could say, like you said, oh yeah, this was explained to me when I was in flesh, so to speak. And how does that affect us now? I kind of had to fill into that, and it's along the same lines, and something like Marie said also is it starts to expand our consciousness here, and as we're opening up our consciousness, it's opening up our path to go into that deep journey, and because we're starting to understand stuff, and we're not, and things that we experience like you're experiencing, it's like, oh, okay, I think this is something related to something I heard on that podcast or whatever. Because there's so many people in history, in recent history, that ended up in the mental institutions because there were voices in their head and whatever, and they had no clue what was going on. They went literally crazy. Or they weren't crazy, people thought they were crazy. They most likely didn't have any concept of what was going on because nothing was passed on to them. And I see that something that could help us now. And then we could also use that knowledge to help other people that if they're find themselves in a situation that they don't understand what the hell's going on. We can help them that way, even though we haven't gone in a higher level and say, okay, this is what I learned from there, and this is what's going on for you. No, this is something I've learned from other people, and it's very familiar with what you're talking about. So that's about it.
Thank you, Ronnie. So I know Matt came off mute. So Matt, and then Ed is off mute. So let's do Matt, Ed. And the quick thing I'm going to mention from my own experience, which I thought was fascinating, I was involved in a group that did paranormal investigation. And I think after a while, I came in much later in the game, they had a medium who would do these Q&As with different spirits. And it was fascinating because she started doing it because there were other people in the group. One of them was a historian. The other one was more interested in metaphysics. And so they would talk to these famous figures, not from a, ooh, gee whiz, it's great, Cleopatra and Egypt. It was much more about who was that person in history and what are they knowing now? Like if you could talk to anybody, what kind of questions would you ask them? And what I thought was so fascinating in one of them, they talked to Joan of Arc. And we all talk now, whenever you think of Joan of Arc and hear her talked about, it's, oh, she heard God. Well, in this instance, when they talked to the spirit of Joan, they said, well, yeah, obviously I was psychic, but I couldn't say that because back in that era, you either you either heard the voice of God or anything else you heard was demonic, the devil, whatever it was, burn at the stake. Still got burned at the stake, but that was more about politics. So it's fascinating that if we go back in history, that opens up all sorts of possibilities of consciousness that we might have looked in the past and said, oh, well, so and so, they were primitive in this era and they didn't understand consciousness the way we do because they always kept talking about hearing the voice of God. Maybe they just had to say it was the voice of God, or maybe they thought it was the voice of God, but it was still, and I'm not trying to demean the idea of hearing God, but what is that? I mean, it's like, I don't know, it kind of unites us in our journeys across all of human history, taking us all the way back in different flavors. And we've tried on different templates of monotheism. And before that, we had our polytheism. And there are all sorts of approaches. So let's go ahead and go to Matt, then Ed. And we'll eventually wind up.
I think to kind of build on that, because one thing that just occurred to me was if on the YouTube channel, if you ever have watched the Wednesdays with Bob, which are like these 10-minute segments of Bob Monroe during a gateway voyage, kind of framing it for the week. But I want to say the third or fourth episode, he talks about Miranon, and he talks about how Miranon in a way is the total self, how the, SHE is an aspect of Miranon and vice versa, and it's part of the total self. And they talk about, and he elaborates on it more. And I think after this, I'm going to try to look that one up. But it's Wednesdays with Bob, and I want to say it's 3 or 4 segments into it. But he does talk more about this connection of the guidance and the total self, higher self, and how I think it's like how Miranon is a part of Lamara is mentioned in this exploration session, and he elaborates on it there. And I just wanted to put that out there as far as something to kind of dig up, watch, to kind of gain it together.
Thanks, Matt. Ed, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm always looking to see how things overlap. This overlaps with advanced remote viewing quite a bit. And being an operational remote viewer, I was fascinated by what they were saying on there because I've had very similar experiences. And I've also lately become really sensitive to the operation of synchronicity. It's more like it's more open and visible now. When you realize, why isn't this working? Why hasn't this happened? Well, you're able to look beyond and see there's a synchronous event for the better that needs this to fall back for a period of time. And then one last thing is for any of you that are familiar with the Urantia book, I think it's fascinating that this is talking about 7 levels. And in the Urantia book, it talks about the 7 psychic levels that humans progress through. And that's going to take a bit of rereading and cross-connecting to understand if they're even related. But there's another example of where this relates to what we're doing every day.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Urantia book, according to Ra, was channeled from a being in the inner earth planes that we're actually talking about right now. So it was a being that was on one of the higher levels, like the 40, 46, 40, 47, whatever it is. But they say that that's who the source material came from for that.
Well, there's a 300-page book on the source of the Urantia book. It never mentions anything like that. So it's still open for debate.
Yep.
Fascinating. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Kathy, too. All of this stuff is fascinating. So 2 weeks from now, we'll have our next exploration in the Monroe archives with Susan Smiley. Remember, that one is not recorded. And then 4 weeks from now, we'll do our next episode, which is episode 7. And I can't remember the name of it, but I think it's in a series of the Miranon episodes. I will do my very best to give us more study questions, because I felt as though when we did our first episode 5, where we had the study questions, it led to a nice throughput of conversation that kind of took us through the episode and did it with specific questions and things like that. So I'll try to go back to that again. But fascinating conversation as usual, everyone. Peter, thanks for joining, and we'll do everything to get you connected with all of that. And I'm going to officially stop the recording and then let us kind of sign out.
Hey, we lost a